Another idea that I'd like to review is how to simplify complex fractions. So why are we doing this? In case you're wondering, later on we'll be doing something called the derivatives and limits. And in order to find the derivative, we're going to have to use limits and something called the limit definition. And part of that is to be able to simplify expressions like this so that we can get to the solution. So how do we simplify complex fractions? Well, there are multiple methods again, but I'm going to pick this specific method and demonstrate it here with the video. And the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to look at all the denominators of the fractions in my problem and decide what the LCD would be. In this case, the LCD for 2, 3, 5, and 10 would be 30. So what I'm going to do is, once I decide the LCD is 30, I'm going to give it to each of the fractions in my problem. So all 4 fractions that were there all get 30. And literally, the result of giving everybody a 30 is that things will divide out into some nicer looking fractions, which will hopefully allow me to add and subtract some simple numbers. So the process is going to be done again here with this example. So let's take a look at example 20. So I begin by writing down all the fractions, and I look at the denominators, 3, 8, 5, and 4. And I have to decide what the LCD is for all of these 3 denominators. So take a minute to see if you can identify what the LCD is. Maybe decide to do a prime factorization and do what we did in the previous video to find the LCD, or maybe you can try to guess the LCD. So were you able to guess that the LCD is 120? I hope you did. If you didn't, then just do the prime factorization and look at all the bases with the highest possible power. So notice that when I write these complex fractions, I put the division sign and I put the equal sign around it, and I keep writing the same always. So that's my main division, and I just keep writing the fractions above and below it. So be careful how you write things, because that's kind of important. So what I'm going to do next is write down all the old fractions that were there in the problem, but in addition, I'm going to put next to each one of them times 120, because that was the LCD of my problem. So again, the purpose is not to make the denominators all become 120. The purpose is to multiply every fraction by the LCD 120, because magical nice things will happen. For instance, what do you get when you multiply 1 over 3 times 120? Keep in mind 120 is the same thing as 120 over 1. So we get 120 divided by 3. And the total there is going to be 40. So that's my first fraction. It's no longer 1/3 times 120. Now, all of a sudden, it is 40, which is significantly easier. Same thing again with 1 over 8 times 120. Again, 120 is 120 over 1, so when we multiply, we get 120 over 8. And you can put this in your calculator, or you can try to do it by hand. The answer will be 15. And so I'm going to end up with 15 right there for the second fraction. Now keep in mind that between the 2 fractions there was a plus sign, so just go ahead and write down the plus sign again. So repeat the same thing again for 120 divided by 5, and you will end up with 120 multiplied by 1 over 5 is the same thing as 120 divided by 1, and then 1 times 5 will be 5 at the end, which gives us 24. And finally, there's a minus, so make sure you copy it. And we have 5 over 4 multiplied by 120, which is the same as 120 over 1. So we multiply the top with the top and the bottom with the bottom. So 5 times 120 multiplied, divided by 4 times 1, and multiply the results. In this case, I get 150. So that's my final denominator. So at this point, add 40 and 15, and you end up with 55, and finally subtract 24 minus 150. So my solution will turn out to be 55 over negative 126, and the negative sign could be written either next to the 126 or in front or on the numerator. So any of these 3 will be fine, but not all 3 of them. So pick one and go ahead and write that down. I like to write my minuses in front of the fraction, so I'm going to switch the minus from the negative 126 all the way to the front of the fraction. So instead of writing negative 1 over 26, I'm going to write down negative 55 over 126. And obviously, both of them are acceptable, so you can do whichever one you like. And in this case, nothing reduces, so we're done.